This is the Motherlands podcast. The intention of this podcast is to provide evidence-based information related to fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum, as well as share positive birth stories. I am your host, Keely Semler. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing an amazing healer and acupuncturist who also happens to be one of my teachers. Lara Elliott is a Reiki practitioner who also specializes in Chinese medicine. We discussed the birth of her daughter, relinquishing control, and the innate wisdom of the body. We are here in Ojai in the beautiful home of Lara Elliott. Thank you so much for being willing to talk to me today. My intention with interviewing people is to share stories about birth, anything related to fertility, motherhood, navigating the changes from maiden to motherhood. And I couldn't think of a more perfect person to talk to than you, because just knowing you over the years and seeing how you've really supported so many women, all walks of life, and bringing awareness to the body needs of women and the emotional needs of women, which I think are very much overlooked in our culture. So I guess my first question for you is, did you always know that you wanted to be a mother?
First of all, thank you so much for having me share a little bit. I think a yes to that question. I remember that must have been around my 20s, early 20s, that I always had the 28 as a number in my head of when I was seeing myself as becoming a mother. Where I would have my first child was 28, which didn't happen, but tracing back from that, I'm very sure that it was definitely in me always. And I'm one of 4 children. So I have 3 siblings and grew up in a busy household.
Yeah, what was it? Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, I grew up in Germany by a town called Düsseldorf, which is one of the bigger cities in Germany. But we lived in a place very landly by a river, just very, especially now, was 43, looking back and having been there last year after having not been there 7 years. Just really idyllic place, I have to say, and something that I've been craving for so many years in a sense of nature and the landscape. And it's one of the wildest things for me going back there last summer, and for the first time with my daughter, who's now 5, was that really very little has changed in the sense from the way things look. Like there's some more houses built in certain areas, but not even comparable to the way places here changed, at least in the places where I live, which is New York, Brooklyn, and Manhattan, and in Los Angeles, which is of course those metropolitan cities. That's wild, right? Storefronts come and go, and there I was blown away. The bakery is still at the same spot, still the same signs. It's very different. So I kept thinking or even saying out loud that I felt like I was in a museum, walking through a museum.
Wow.
So yeah, that's where I grew up, riding my bicycle a lot. One of 4 siblings, the second oldest, 2 sisters, 1 brother. The brother is the youngest, and in a family, parents, an interesting mix between conservative and liberal, but not in the sense of political parties, but just the way of life. Conservative in a way of none of them ever did drugs or anything like that, or really partying or any of this, but both very nature oriented people and traveling a lot. And I think that's what really imprinted my life and my connection to certain cultures, the Eastern cultures, and what I became to really dive into in my spiritual and work practice, life practice. So yeah, many trips to faraway places like the Himalayas when we were young. My dad used to be a mountain climber as a hobby, so exposed to Buddhism and things like that. So yeah, in a big picture, a beautiful childhood and in a beautiful surrounding, and like most everybody, also traumas. But yeah, I want to, maybe one childhood memory which is coming up now and perfect for this subject of your beautiful offering in the podcast and the sharing of women, is I remember, oh gosh, it's actually that I was in the kitchen, and maybe I don't know how old I was, maybe 12, maybe 8. But I said to my mom, I'm not going to have children. I don't ever want to have children. And then she said, why? And I said, oh, because it must hurt so much. Giving birth must be so painful and horrible. And she said, Lara, don't say that. Like, I mean, she was kind of like brushing me off, but not in a loving way. But she's like, come on, this is so silly of you to say, because it's a different kind of pain. So she said all of these, of course, in German. So I'm paraphrasing, but she said it's very different than just getting hurt. It's a pain where you know when it begins and ends. And she, of course, meant it in a greater scheme of things. But it's also for a different intention, you know. So something along those lines. I mean, again, it was a long time ago. But I remember that imprinted me very much. You know, it was like these immediate moments of like, oh. And from somebody who gave birth to actually 5 children. Her first one didn't live. So that was the trauma.
Have you asked your mom about the story of your birth, of you being born?
It's so fascinating because it's a little blurry. And I don't know if it's blurry now in her memory. She's in her 70s, and only in the recent decade have I really been in the place of asking these certain questions to my parents. And you know, my mom, again, my parents are I think everybody is unique, but my mom is definitely eccentric in her own ways and not swimming with the mainstream in her ways. One thing that surprised me that I didn't know until, you know, only like a few years, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, is that I think my dad didn't attend any of the birth.
Any of your siblings' birth?
No, and I have to ask them again. Like, you know, it sounds crazy, especially given that she gave birth to 5 children.
That doesn't sound that unusual to me, given that time period.
Yeah, I did, but I didn't realize that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes also a lot of sense to my mom, like the way she is. And then my dad was always working a lot and being away. And so there was a little bit also about their dynamic. And I think when she shared it first, I got immediately upset with my dad and wanted to call him and say, what? Wait. That's like, I'm mad at you now for the next 30 years of my life. And I said, why? And I, again, like had this immediate like anger towards my dad, or like, I can't believe he did that to her. And she was like, no. It's like, it was almost like a choice that she made. So yeah, it's a lot to think and feel into for even myself and probably other women. But I know for myself now, or even 5.5 years ago when Claire was born, that would be unthinkable. I would want my partner, if I would have a child with a partner, I would want this person to be there, to be the person holding my hand, to be the person being by my side. And so, yeah, my parents have a tricky relationship, ever had, and they always had and still have. And my dad is now in his early 80s and my mom in her early 70s. So that's their stuff, their karma, and it's okay. But I also contributed some of it to this relationship. However, I realized maybe it was more of a thing back then. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. But in terms of like how you were born and the story that you were told about how you were born, do you know anything about it?
I did ask, and then always she shares, because again, it's like a bunch of kids.
Right.
And then so she tells, I know like certain things were tricky with like some of my siblings. My younger, like my brother, the youngest of us, was incubated, you know, he was in an incubator for a while. So I think he was came a bit early. I'm not sure. It was a vaginal birth.
Well, I'm sure it was. I know back in that time period, they had a lot of like female only hospitals. So I wonder what it was like giving birth in Germany in that time. I don't know.
Yeah, I will do some more research and we do a part 2 on this. It would be interesting to find out more. It's just like a different, I mean, my mom definitely parented different than I, and this is easy to say now because I have 1 child versus 4 children. And we were all very close together. So my oldest sister is only a year and a half, even a little bit less than a year and a half older, and then my youngest is only 13 months younger, and then my brother also very close. So it was like one after the other.
Wow.
One thing that I know is that I was breastfed for only like a hot second, maybe like a few weeks. And I was also like, Mom, why? And she was like, oh yeah, they didn't really make any milk. So yeah, I think it is also a little bit my mom personality that's showing in there, whether it's like the kind of how to, approach birth. Maybe she had a friend that came along, I wonder. One thing, however, that comes to mind in this moment is that even still now, friends or clients or students from Germany, it's so I share about how this beautiful, good trend of more doula support, postpartum, prenatal is more and more coming here to the forefront in a very important manner, and I'm very grateful for that, and I have this community through my practice. You are part of it. And when I share this with my German clients or students, then they say, they remind me that they have a different system there. And part of the healthcare is the postpartum care. So it's actually still the nurse that comes to the house and does a lot of the things that a postpartum doula would do, which is not here.
Not here, but amazing that exists.
It's part of, it's paid for. Yeah. So my mom probably had some people that helped. But yeah, definitely something to find out more about.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm wondering if you would be willing to kind of share your birth story about Claire and how she came into the world, and also a little bit about your postpartum journey. Like, how did your relationship to yourself change or evolve after you had Claire?
Yeah, I'd love to share. And maybe I'm going to bring in the conception journey in too, because that's I share that with a lot of my clients who are on a fertility journey, and also I do womb healing as part of my offerings. So I work with a lot of women. Well, and this is not only connected to conception or birth or becoming a mother, but also the connecting to the feminine, reconnecting to the feminine and the yin essence within us, and even after relationship breakups where we kind of lose ourselves or in relationships. So in all ways. However, I do support a lot of people through miscarriages and after that, and, all abortions and things like that. So I had, when my husband and I, when we felt ready to call in our daughter, or our child, and I did feel a daughter always. I even had a name that always came up, Anouk. When we felt her spirit, I had basically in that year 3 miscarriages, to make it short. Chemical pregnancies, then like a 5-6 week heartbeat stop. Miscarriages was very common. I mean, it's common at those times with the heartbeat. And the third one was like months later, but it was one of those where I didn't even realize I was pregnant until I was starting to bleed, or was diagnosed with the miscarriage. That was obviously very intense, and always when we feel ready and then we see I did a positive pregnancy test, because that's then the time when we do that, like, okay, the test. It's very disappointing because we feel ready and then it's not happening. And thankfully I was connected to my body's wisdom and my spirituality, and also just a way with life that I did, while allowing myself to be disappointed, to be sad. I did know all along, which I remind my clients of, that it's the womb wisdom. It's a wisdom that is releasing something that is not viable. while this is heartbreaking sometimes, so often, and sad, that's our ego. It's our mind wanting something, and the body's wisdom is saying, no, it's not. So I'm not even saying, it's just what it is. So there's so much there. It's not, we're not getting punished for something. We need to allow ourselves all the emotions going through these journeys, because they can be really heartbreaking and disappointing. And if it's longer and more, really very humbling in this journey, and causing all kinds of, doubts. Am I ever going to be a mother? And this journey can sometimes be a little, or a lot humbling. So, but that was my journey, and it was all in the same year. And then and it's literally started at the beginning of that year, and then at the end of the year, at the very end, over New Year's, I became pregnant with Claire. Interestingly, the moment I was pregnant with her, it wasn't Anuka anymore. The name was not there. It was eventually Claire came in. Oh, that's just interesting, because I still like the name, but it was just not for her. Mm-hmm. And David and I, by the way, we've done together ceremonies. We wrote letters to the spirits, the souls. It's very important, because that's for us, we holding that grief, and it's important to really allow that. While there is the womb wisdom and all of that is real and maybe true, but we still need to have our process and really allowing that to grieve. So we did do ceremonies, and also for calling in, and even went into the desert, into Joshua Tree one time with a little bonfire, and releasing and calling in and all the things. Because of the journey with my miscarriages, then when I became pregnant with Claire, I did have a pretty rough first trimester because of nausea. For the first time, in hindsight, realized, maybe that was that's how depression feels. Because I was basically through the constant feeling of sickness, or feeling, malaise, and then this increased sense of smell, which was insane for me. So sensitive to even roses, things that I just, water. Drinking water for me was disgusting. I lost a lot of weight in the first trimester because there was barely anything that I could eat or smell or drink. And then driving through LA, it was like McDonald's smell here, the smell there was like a nightmare. Yeah. But basically, and I always felt like, I don't know if anybody I can see this image, but the Smurfs, there was Gargamel, and Gargamel always had this cloud, this thunder cloud over his head, and that's how I felt. Which again, in hindsight, it's like that's maybe how depression feels like, where you just can't, even all the spiritual tools, right? You're like, no, can't access them, so you're just basically feeling it, and that's the first trimester. But once that lifted, with how not always, but we oftentimes see that, the first trimester, and then that lifting, it was only blissful. And I feel that this bliss never hasn't ended. And I really mean it. I've never cried any of the postpartum times when, because of losing sleep or anything, or feeling frustrated. I actually never felt really frustrated. So it's been really an incredible journey. And I in contemplation, thinking it probably is because I was so ready. It wasn't like, I want a child because that's something I need to do because everybody's been doing it. It was such a deep, deep soul calling. And I was ready. I was humbled by these losses, and just so excited and feeling so blessed to have the opportunity to be a mom. So that then segueing, which is really connected to this probably, with birth, I didn't have a doula. I did have a friend at the time who was taking a doula training. We both know her. She was one of my best friends at the time, and she said, hey, would you be open for me just kind of practicing a little bit with you, being like in a doula, having like some meetings, and then I could be with you at birth if you would like to. And since she was one of my nearest and dearest at the time, I was like, sure, and it was great. But for me personally, and a lot of people are surprised about this, I'm an alternative medicine practitioner and I'm a Chinese medicine physician, acupuncturist, Reiki teacher, all the things, holistic health coach, breathwork facilitator, all the things. And I did not have this deep call and feeling for a natural home birth in water and the whole thing. If I would analyze it now, maybe because of my husband, the way he is, if I would be in a relationship with someone who's super hippie in a good way, that part of me would maybe come through and I was like, let's do this. But David is very pragmatic. He also had already a child from a previous marriage long time ago. So it was also like a whole thing to be in a relationship with someone who has already had that experience. And his ex-wife had a C-section. So there was also a few things, where just really transparently might have been influencing me just in a way where I knew he wouldn't be the one saying like, honey, I'm going to stand here by your side, whatever. I mean, it was obviously my choice. I'm doing things my way. And my husband is also very his way, but in this case he did. But it wasn't like, he is also very security person, safety, security oriented. And I think that we both felt after these experiences, and I think he never really fully allowed him to feel, also his disappointment or the emotions around the losses the year leading up. I think all of these are little elements that played into the fact that I basically said, I don't care how this child is going to get here as long as she's healthy and alive.
That's beautiful. And what a humble reminder, and a good philosophy to have when you are pregnant is to keep that in mind more than having your birth look a certain way.
Yeah, and this because I remember that there was this beautiful video that years before a friend sent, and it was this like magical home birth, and it went viral of this like super cute couple, guy, long hair, of course, so like so stereotype. And it like looked like a Topanga cottage, the whole thing. And this beautiful, some people made like a music to the video. And it was just an incredible, beautiful birth of like someone in water. And then the husband behind her naked and holding her. I mean, it was just like, okay, this would be amazing. But it doesn't have to be mine, right? I don't like it's like, and this is how I am. I'm also an Aquarius, and all. I don't live my life based on what other people. I get inspired, but if it doesn't come from the very deepest soul part of me, then it's not mine. And another part is, so basically, I'm gonna jump to answer. I had her with a cesarean, with a C-section that was scheduled but not planned. So I always said I'm open to however she wants to come in, vaginal, cesarean, but I'm not attached to any of it. I'm not going to schedule the cesarean because it would be nice to have the most. So I always said I would like the most natural birth, but I'm also totally open. I'm also not having any negative associations with hospitals, I have to say, maybe because of where I grew up. I even did a volunteering internship at the end of high school or gymnasium at a hospital because I was curious about it. The hospital was beautiful. It's in a beautiful setting. Even driving by there with the bicycle last summer with Claire, I was like, this is a beautiful hospital. And, good doctors, just clean. So I know, and also from talking and supporting different women with different experiences, because that is nice, right? If you don't have any negative associations with a hospital, some people are traumatized by hospitals and hospital visits. And maybe one of the reasons is because they have a parent that they had to visit over months or years because of some disease, and parents died. And, there's many reasons why somebody would be like, I don't like hospitals. And that can obviously influence to not wanting to go there to birth a baby. So I understand that, and I think it's so important that everybody really does what feels right to them. That said, I was very open, and then at the end of my pregnancy, which was, again, I felt so wonderful and just grateful. And
you had a really lovely doctor too.
Oh, you like him? Yeah.
Well, what was
because a lot of doulas are like, ooh, that doctor.
Well, how did you choose him?
Yeah.
And you don't have to say who it is unless you want to. But
maybe not. But I love him, and if anybody is interested listening to this, I'm happy to share. You can share the contact, of course, and confidentiality. No, I loved my OBGYN. Again, I'm a alternative medicine practitioner, but I'm really interested, and I also learned a lot of Western medicine. We have to, as Chinese medicine practitioners, learn a lot of Western medicine. So I appreciate it. I've always appreciated doctors, and of course there's all kinds of different people out there sharing, and Western medicine is not always, there's so much to say, but in general, I'm not like, I don't, so I'm open to that. I have a lot of respect for good Western doctors. And when I moved from New York to LA, little sideway here into the story, I first saw a woman in a hospital in Pasadena. And when I had that first chemical pregnancy, and even though I was already an acupuncturist, was my first study in New York, I had never until that moment heard the word or the term chemical pregnancies, because I was pregnant. I was still in the program here in LA, and I started bleeding, and I basically went to the practice, and it was like maybe, few weeks into the positive pregnancy test. And I went there, and she did a blood test, or, did a little examination, and she said, oh yeah. And I think what she said was, so she was very abrasive. She brushed it off. She said, yeah, you're not pregnant. And I said, what? And she's like, you're not pregnant. It was I was very stunned, and I didn't feel in any way held.
Yeah, the bedside manners were not there.
The bedside manners were not there. The opposite, because it was traumatizing. That was the first time I've consciously experienced a miscarriage, and that was the big one, because I was like, oh, it's happening. That was really intense. So I was a bit traumatized by that, and then looked for a new doctor. And found then this person that too, and he is in a big hospital in downtown LA. So why I also loved him so much is after these, or during these miscarriages, the journeys, I called him my spiritual guru, because all he said was, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't blame it on anything. It's not this, it's not that. You're not doing anything wrong. Just keep doing what you're doing. And that's what I repeat so often to my clients, because we do want to blame miscarriages on our partner, on what we ate. If we had a Reiki session, that's what I say to my Reiki students, just maybe don't practice on Reiki on first trimester women, not because Reiki harms.
Right.
Reiki is love, but by people trying to find a reason why. And if they had a Reiki session, they will blame it on the Reiki. If they had a massage, it could be I had that green juice. I ate the apple from that tree. And to hear somebody who has helped women, thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, maybe not, but thousands of women to support them in birth in any way, and throughout the journeys, and seen 1 million miscarriages. I'm exaggerating, that was the numbers, but it was very healing to hear. So he was a huge anchor, and just incredibly. I like people who know their stuff. He's very competent. He's really good at what he does. He's very passionate. He has, I think, 2 or 3 children himself, but he lives for his job. Some people say, oh yeah, he does a lot of C-sections, but he also does a lot of vaginal birth.
I attended my first birth with him. My first ever client called me up. I was in graduate school doing research, and she's like, well, I'm 47 years old. I'm going through a divorce, and apparently I'm having a baby. She thought she was going through menopause, but it turns out she was pregnant. And she's like, I know exactly what I need. I know this doctor. I love him. All I need is someone to kind of safeguard me from anyone coming in the room abruptly and interrupting her focus. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And this doctor came in last second because she started pushing, and she was in the shower. This doctor came in a full suit and had to deliver the baby in the shower. And it was,
wow.
It was so quick. I mean, it was also her 6th baby.
Wow.
So it's beautiful. Yeah, he's done a lot of all sorts of births.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
he's incredible, and someone I trusted 110%, and you want that kind of person on your side during birth. So what happened, why I had the cesarean, was I was already past the due date, and I know now people are like, the due date is just a number. But I was past the due date, and we went into the first week past. And again, because of my history with 3 miscarriages, I was like, I'm not going to take any risks. That's just not what I want to do. And I don't know what the risks were, or, you know, but I just intuitively, I wanted to be on the safe side, whatever is the safe side. And he said, yes, I want that too. But basically my cervix didn't drop. It didn't soften, and it didn't drop. And he said, well, we can wait. So we waited a little bit. And he said, the only thing is, if your cervix doesn't drop, you likely end up with an emergency C-section. So then you will have both. You will have the labor, the pain, and then you have the C-section. And the C-section, it's not one is better than the other.
Right.
It's not like, oh yeah, the C-section is easy peasy. No, it's different, very different. But what you maybe miss out on the pain of labor, you will have afterwards, because it's a full-blown abdominal surgery. Cervix didn't soften or drop, and then we basically scheduled it in the like one week past the due date, and he was delivering. It was like a 6:15 in the morning, or 6:45 in the morning. My friend was there, David was there. Again, I said, yeah, please, not this. But it was a surgery, so there were certain, parts to it. And it was him and the Japanese doctor that was so they were both delivering together, which was really cool.
So sweet.
Yeah. And I mean, or she was his assistant, and I think that's how they did it. It was actually, one was assisting the other in a different birth. That's how they did it for many years. So she was assisting him in that round, and I remember that when he got her out, and it was also he did delayed cord clipping, immediately, obviously on my body where there was space on my chest. I have to say, and this is important, right? That we don't want to influence anybody. Everybody needs to do it their own way, and it's so important, because there's women who really want a natural vaginal birth, and then they're really disappointed if they don't get that. I'm not that person. I'm just different. People would think, oh, you're so organic and alternative. I can't believe you had a C-section. You didn't know. Like, I don't care. I'm not that person, actually. And it was a really easy experience. I'm also having a different kind of pain tolerance, I have to say. Because of my work and my practice, pain to me is an energy. So I know how to look at it in a different way, at least in some situation, without the suffering to it. Again, just the excitement and the bliss and the gratitude for this child has been the most overpowering force to anything. So whether it was prenatal, after that first trimester of feeling not good, but then continuing, and also then into motherhood, and sleepless nights for still now, because these still co-sleeps, and not sleepless nights, but lack of sleep, or always being on guard or awake if you hear a sound, or the love and the gratitude to be a steward for another soul, and the portal for that is just so much vaster. Regarding my body, the nursing thankfully worked really well right away. Yeah, it was so painful for a few days, very much, but then you put the lotion on and you keep nursing, and you just do that, It's like, it's painful.
Yeah, and your body builds a level of toughness.
Yeah, actually my Chinese herb teacher, she said, she's a mom of 3 and older, she said, I'm just telling all my patients when they're in a trimester to just take, under the shower, take a rough towel and just wrap it over your nipples to kind of get your body used to it, which I thought was genius. Would anybody do it? Probably not, because unless there's a baby wanting the milk and you wanted to feed it, you're not doing that. But it's the idea of our body is resilient, right? Which can be a blessing and a downfall in different scenarios. I ended up having like a trigger point pain in my neck, which I've heard from several friends and clients who had cesareans that they also had this. So I was for a few extra days for that reason actually in the hospital with Claire.
Did they think it was preeclampsia?
No. Preeclampsia, no, completely. No, I didn't know that there's a connection to it.
Sometimes there's shoulder pain associated with preeclampsia.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Wow, I haven't heard this. It was right in the middle of the center of the neck, the upper neck. And I know because of my acupuncture, I know the trigger points and how the referral pattern is. And it was like when I got up, and you have a big cut in your abdominal, like in the lower abdomen. So you kind of have to learn how to walk again for a moment there.
Yeah, or even to sit up. Like you can't use your core that you're used to.
Yeah, because it's cut through, and I hope this doesn't sound too brutal. It's just because it's in the end of the day you're so in this bubble of, oh my God, there's a child, but this is also happening, and that's why you don't just say, oh, C-section is easy peasy. It's not, but there's a time and space for it. And we're in 2023 now, so there's ways to do it safely, and obviously and also heal it safely. And the bodies are amazing. Well,
also, in all birth is, I love telling my clients, all birth is natural.
I know this is what, thankfully more and more people, I know there was this whole movement of saying, no, it's not only vaginal birth that's natural, or birth is natural. Maybe you were the one who had said it first and it went into my ear.
Well, also, I think that was my whole intention for interviewing people on this subject, on sharing their birth, is because when people go into the birth experience and they become pregnant and there's all these stories about doing it a certain way, part of my process working with clients is sort of recognizing that no one has their body, no one has their baby, and no one's going to have their birth experience. So their experience is unique to them as an individual. And so sometimes a lot of people go into the experience thinking, oh, I really want it to be a certain way. And the more you try and control birth, the more the universe loves to swoop in and say, you're not in control.
Yeah, I think it's good to have intentions, and right in my practice of meditation, mindfulness, attachment is one of number one source for suffering. So it's to put out into the universe. It's like any kind of manifestation. I would love to live in more nature, to have a few acres or an acre. I'd love to have, but it's more about what does the ego want, and to understand, okay, this is ego stuff, and we all have an ego, so that's okay, fair enough. And then maybe making it more about how do I want to feel, right? Rather than I want to feel, and making it about this, I want to feel the connection to my baby. And because some people think, oh, it's a cesarean, it's more clinical, and then it's taking me away from that original female earth mother energy,
or the spirituality, oh, you're only you're a superior mother if you do it this one way.
Yeah. It's more about how you are going to mother afterwards, but it's beautiful. And I see some women sharing that I've supported through the journeys of sharing about how they gave birth at home in the bed, and how much empowered they were from it. To me, it has been empowering in general to become a mother, I have to say, because one of it is a lot of BS falls away, right, of priorities and drama and oh, drama here, drama there, and you're like, I don't have time for all this drama. There's things that are a little bit more important, and then it's obviously not that there's no more drama. Maybe there's other dramas, but
I love what you said about what do you want to feel through that experience, and the idea of feeling safe. I think, if I have a client who's undecided on where they want to give birth, on paper, giving birth at home sounds amazing and lovely, but that's paper. How does that feel in your body is a different story. And there's no right or wrong answer. Yeah. It's just what feels right to you as an individual.
Exactly, because a lot of people have these ideas even of motherhood based upon comparison and other people's experiences, and nowadays in this time, it's like where we all live in social media, based upon images. So it's, to really, come back to this, right, the authentic self, what it matters to me and why, right? Asking ourselves, why do I want this kind of birth? And again, I just see it because this is the work that I do, or my practice, supporting people in with their emotional everything. And I think it's important, why do I want to be a mother? Because it's oftentimes like, oh, if it's for the reason of just having a child because it looks cute on Instagram to color code your outfits with your child, you're going to be the mom who's going to suffer because of the lack of sleep and because of basically giving your life over to support another child.
And it's demanding, Well,
it's everything, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world. If we have a meditation practice before we're having a child, we're probably going to be happier mothers. Because
say more.
I'm just self-reflecting, and maybe this is sometimes why it helps to be a bit older as a mother, to have some life experiences. And just, for me, I've learned in my life and through my life and different experiences, and then also through meditation, the difference between pain and suffering, and the difference between, and also ego, and just not letting go of ego, that's not a thing, but to be being aware of it. If I still want to live my life the way I did before having a child, I'm going to suffer, because unless you have a partner who really is an amazing team and taking your child as, just there, then you will have soon time to go and get the healing sessions, go and get this, and maybe even travel, or maybe even go back to your work soon enough. But yeah, I'm the way I mothered, and my husband's parents, it was a little bit more, okay, I'm just going to be a mother now for the next few years here. Forever.
Right.
But, and then it becomes more effort of doing other things, creating space for, your own ways. And so it's important that we have these relationships within ourselves and are clear with them, have learned a way of compassion with ourselves, and also what identity means. Because if we are stuck to our identity because of certain roles we play and things we do, and then those things fall away, and then that's when we say, oh, I don't know who I am anymore, which in Buddhism we say that's a great answer to a question or things to feel. But it doesn't feel good to the mind, because mind wants to be in control and likes familiar. But if all of a sudden things are new, we've never done it, we feel overwhelmed. Life is overwhelming if we're really conscious with it. The world is overwhelming, and life is not meant to be only fun and sweet and happy and easy, right? Right. So that's why I would say with meditation is not meant to always feel comfortable. That's what I wanted to say earlier. I learned in my life to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
In the discomfort.
Yeah.
It's funny, when I do prenatal sessions with clients, I teach them different practices to practice relaxation when they're not feeling their best. Teaching how to sit in discomfort when they don't want to be pregnant anymore, when they're tired, when they're restless, when they're anxious, when they're anticipating their birth starting, when they start to get in their mind about, well, I thought the baby was going to be here by now. And, I thought for sure I would have my baby in my arms by now, and they don't.
Yeah, we are happier mothers if we have some practice of allowing to let go of control.
Yeah.
And we all like to try to be in control. The mind does it. But if we're aware of this, if we have a practice of really saying, I am not in control of a lot of things, it's really helpful. Yeah, it makes a more blissful mother or happy mother to already have some tools to release control.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure we'll do a part 2.
We'll do a part 2 anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share with friends and family, and stay tuned for the next episode.